Okay, so hello everyone.
Hello. Hello.
So I'm very happy to see you all here today at our alumni fair. My presentation is the last presentation before you're welcome to go and talk to all the alumni to hear about their personal experiences studying in the States. I'm going to give you some very basic information about U.S. higher education, and then there should be some time to ask some questions at the end. Just so you know a little bit about myself, my name is Catherine Skidova, and I'm the Regional Coordinator for Education USA. So I work with the advising team here in Kiev and in our other 3 centers in Ukraine, in addition to 12 other countries. I cover quite a large portfolio. And I studied at a very small private liberal arts college called Oberlin College. It's in Ohio, in the middle of a cornfield, essentially. And then I did my master's degree at The Ohio State University at a much larger campus. So I can answer questions about small private liberal arts colleges and very large public institutions as well. So since you are all here today, I imagine that you are interested in U.S. higher education. Who would like to tell me what particular about U.S. higher education draws you to considering as a degree option? Quality. Quality, okay. What else?
Liberal arts.
Liberal arts, okay.
Future salary.
Future salary, correct. Possibilities, okay.
Opportunities.
These are all good answers. So, why should you consider studying in the U.S.? So, for those of you who are still kind of on the fence and don't know why you should consider studying in the U.S., one reason why you should definitely consider it is that the United States puts a lot of money into education spending and development more than any other country. So this graph is from a year or so ago, so it's not completely fresh data, but the trend has remained roughly the same. But the United States is spending over $800 billion on education. So what does this mean? This means that world-class facilities, laboratories, libraries, research facilities, also things like sports houses and things like that are really well developed in the U.S. So you as an international student and also American students get to take advantage of this significant investment that goes into education throughout the U.S. Another reason why you should definitely consider studying in the U.S. is that if you look at world prizes and leaders in various fields of study around the world, this is a graph from Nobel Peace Prize or Nobel Prize winners from around the world, and the vast majority of those who win the Nobel Prize each year are in the U.S. Again, they don't have to be Americans; they can be associated with the U.S. higher education institution. But the vast majority of people who are receiving these Nobel Prizes every year are from the U.S. One way or another. The bottom graph also is good information for all of you because you would definitely be considered international students, is that for various fields of study, the majority of those winning the Nobel Prizes are not U.S. citizens, but they are associated with an institution in the U.S. So again, if you're interested in being part of cutting-edge research and being part of an education experience that has you working with professors and others that are winning these prizes, and maybe you could possibly win a prize in the future, this is one really great reason for you to consider the U.S. Another reason why you can definitely consider the U.S. is according to an annual report called the Open Doors Report. This measures student mobility between the U.S., going to the U.S. and from the U.S. Last year's report showed that there are over 1 million international students on U.S. campuses. So this is the second year in a row that there have been over 1 million international students from around the world. What this means for you is that you have a chance to make friends with literally citizens from almost every country around the world. Not only will you be meeting with American students and learning with American students, but you'll also be learning with other students from many other countries around the world. This is good for you not only personally in your social life as you get to develop friends, but also in your personal connections as you graduate and move on to your career in the next stages of your life. It's a really great opportunity for you to be part of this network of alumni from the institution where you will be studying. Okay, so I'm going to give you some very basic information about U.S. higher education. What are some key characteristics that you already know about U.S. higher education?
Different. Different from Ukrainians in the form of how do you study, what do you study, the options you can get for your grade and etc.
Okay, so the structure is quite different. Okay, anything else?
There are a lot of private universities.
Say again?
There are a lot of private universities.
Yes, a lot of private universities, that's correct. One more thing before I move on. Anything else you know? No? All right, so the first thing you should know is that the United States does not have a Ministry of Education. Okay? This might sound very strange to some of you if you're not very familiar with the U.S. higher education system, but there is no Ministry of Education. What this means is there is not a set list of universities by ranking, by degrees that I or any of the advisors can give you, right? So oftentimes students want to say, let me see the best universities for physics. I want the best universities for something else. Because our Ministry of Education, because we don't have a Ministry of Education, and it's decentralized, every university decides for themselves what type of programs to offer, what type of students to admit to those programs, how much financial aid, if any, they give to those students, and the list goes on and on. So really, we can't give you a set list because each university is deciding a lot of this for themselves. There are over 4,000 universities in the United States. Sometimes I've seen numbers saying 4,700, 4,500, 4,300, but well over 4,000 institutions in the United States. Of these 4,000, about 1,700 are offering graduate level programs. So again, what this means for you, because we don't have a set list, and you will have to do a lot more research and work right now to determine which of these institutions would be best for you. As again, you're one student, you're going to do one probably degree or one program, you have 4,000 institutions to select from. So in terms of the types of institutions that we have in the US, there are three broad categories. The first category I'll talk about is community colleges. This is a two-year higher education degree that you get. If you finish this program, you get what's called an associate's degree. The vast majority of students, international students in particular, are going to be continuing on at a foreign institution, so we'll end up with a bachelor's degree anyway. Community colleges are great for some students if their English level maybe is a little bit lower. They don't have as competitive scores or grades to be admitted to a more competitive institution. They're looking for a very small community, either that's a small class size, but also more attention from professors. And then also, community colleges tend to be quite a bit cheaper than other institutions. They don't have typically a lot of financial aid, so even though they might be quite a bit cheaper than other institutions, that's something else that you'd have to take into consideration. Beyond the community colleges, which are only undergraduate institutions, so again, they're two-year associate's higher education degree that you would get, we have public and private institutions. The vast majority of community colleges are public institutions as well. Public institutions and private institutions vary on the very nature of how they're set up. Public institutions are being supported by U.S. taxpayers, so this is coming from state taxes and federal taxes as well. Some of these institutions, their costs tend to be quite a bit lower than private institutions, but sometimes they aren't able to provide full financial support to international students. So it may not be the better choice for a lot of international students depending on the institution. Private colleges tend to be quite a bit more expensive than public institutions, but also typically will have more financial support they can provide to all students on campuses. Both public and private and community colleges can be quite large. So you could have 50,000, 60,000 students who are studying on that campus, or they can be quite small, which is a couple hundred or a couple thousand. So where I went to my undergraduate degree at Oberlin College, there was like 2,000, 3,000 students on that campus, so quite a bit smaller. Whereas the Ohio State University, where I did my master's degree, I think has like 50,000 students that are studying at all levels of education on that campus. So in terms of the application process, the main thing that's really important for you all to understand is that the process takes quite a bit longer to apply to U.S. institutions than does to Ukrainian institutions. So if you are hoping to study in the United States this coming fall, say September of 2018, you really should have started doing research and finding out your options last summer. So right now, this is a great time for those of you who are interested in studying in 2019, for example. It's not impossible. You can still probably get admitted if you apply now, or actually, no, the admissions process already passed this year. But in terms of what you need to do, it will vary slightly between undergraduate and graduate students, and it will vary slightly between institution to institution. So some institutions might have more requirements, some might have less, okay? So this is just the general parameters for all students, undergrad and grad students, to consider. you're going to have to show that you have some sort of academic experience here. So for high school students, your high school experience. For those of you who want to do graduate programs, your high school experience and your undergraduate experience here in Ukraine will have to be demonstrated. You're going to have to write various essays. The essay structure and kind of content will depend on your program and whether or not you're an undergrad or graduate student. But for the most part, you're going to be asked to write about yourself, why you want to pursue this degree at that institution, and what you can bring to that campus that no one else can. You'll have to get recommendation letters from your teachers or professors. For high school students in particular, if you're playing a sport or play a musical instrument, then your coaches or music instructors can also write a recommendation letter for you as well. The biggest mistake that I see in particular that students make is they will often ask the director of their school, they'll ask the rector, they'll ask somebody that has a position of power at their education institution here in Ukraine. And that person typically doesn't know that student very well, and it shows in the letter. So it's best to pick a person to write your recommendation letter that knows you really, really well and can write only the best things about you. You're the most amazing person that's ever studied on the campus, and you're going to do great things in your future. That's what you want this person to write.
Yeah. And could it be a recommendation for work, for instance?
Yes, so that's probably more going to be in lines with for graduate students in particular. It would depend on the institution. Sometimes institutions will say we want academic recommenders. Sometimes it's okay to have work. If you are looking to get a degree in the U.S. that's related to your work experience now, that is also going to work well in your favor. But again, it has to be someone that knows you really well, not your grandmother, not your mom, not your dad, somebody else. Okay? And then you also take various exams. You probably have heard of the TOEFL exam, the IELTS. You have to do some exam that demonstrates your level of English. For undergrad students, you're going to be taking the SAT or the ACT for the most part, and graduate students will be taking the GRE or GMAT depending on their on your intended field of study states. There are some institutions that are test optional, meaning you don't have to take exams, except for the English language exam. That's almost always required for international students. But what you should know is that many test optional schools, even though they don't require the exam for admissions, might require the exam for financial aid. So if you need financial support from the institution, then you should also look into preparing for these exams. And these are things that the Education State advisors can help you with. Okay, so what does it cost? We're here to the scary part of the presentation. How much does it cost to study in the U.S.?
$30,000.
Say it again?
30,000 for public university per year.
Okay, so 30,000 for a public institution per year, okay.
65,000 for private universities, for instance.
65,000 for private, okay.
But you can have a discount from university.
Someone's done the research, yes. So we'll show the scary part first, then we'll show the not so scary part. So many students, and again, this is not just international students, this is American students as well. Like, how can I afford to get an education? How can I afford to get a bachelor's or master's degree? If you look at all the costs, all the things that you have to pay for in one way or another, starting from now, from preparing for exams, taking exams, applying, and then moving to the U.S., it is astronomical amount of money that you have to think about, okay? So for private institutions, as I mentioned, they can be as much as $60,000 a year for the tuition alone. You still have to think about housing. Are you going to live on campus? You think about food. What are you going to eat all year long, right? So again, this amount of money that is required for studying in the U.S. is very, very high. And I can say that for most Americans, they also are not paying these fees. They see these fees, they know they're out of control, but there are ways you can get around some of these fees to make it more affordable for you and for your family. So for the exams, depending on the exams you take and how many you have to take, this can be up to $500. I think the TOEFL exam is over $100. The GRE is $200 some. So again, these definitely will add up. Applications, every university charges an application fee to review your documents. This is typically $30, $50 for undergraduate students. It can be as much as $100 or $200 for certain graduate programs. So it's quite a bit of money. That being said, many institutions do offer what's called an application fee waiver. You have to request these in advance. Not every institution will give it to international students. Not every institution will give it all the time to all students. but it's worth asking. And if you get them, then obviously your application fee is zero for those institutions. Tuition, room and board, again, this is a lot of money. For tuition, room, board, it's nice in one way because you live on campus, you go to dining hall with your friends, everything's kind of taken care of with this big fee. Trips is kind of, most students want to travel around the States, it's not required, obviously. Books, again, books tend to be really, really expensive. Most books, though, I have found in my personal experience, is you can find them at the library. So maybe some of the STEM fields will require you to purchase a book, but for the most part, you can find your books at the library. So this fee also really depends on how active you are in looking for all ways to save costs once you get to campus. All international students are required to have health insurance. This is going to vary from institution to institution. That is a requirement for them. So again, this is a scary slide, I know. We'll move on to the less scary slide. So the way most American students and most international students can think about covering these really huge costs of studying in the States, the vast majority of students are getting some form of financial support. There are a handful of students, both American and international students, that can afford to pay everything. They can afford to pay those really high fees. My family could never afford that, but there's some families that can. But for students that want to look for ways to cover their costs, there are some government and foundation support that are available for students. So in Ukraine, there's a Fulbright program, and we have colleagues from the Fulbright office that can talk about that program. It's for graduate studies. The State Department has a program called Opportunity Funds. This does not cover tuition or fees, but it can help cover all those other scary costs I was showing, that the exams and the application fees. Ukrainian students also have access to worldwide studies, which is through the Pinchuk Foundation, and then the SEEK grant, both for graduate studies. Unfortunately, currently there's no foundation or government support for undergraduate students. Don't be so sad if you're an undergraduate student. Sometimes third parties will cover the costs. So I've seen employers cover the expenses for their employees to go get a graduate degree in the States, especially MBA programs or maybe certain LLM programs. Some families have their own fees or have their own savings that they can contribute to their education in the States. Again, most universities can give a lot of money to students, but maybe not the whole amount that you need. So if your family has any savings that can contribute towards the cost of studying in the States, that would work in your favor, of course. But the vast majority of students are getting the funding directly from the institutions where they'll be studying. This is why those 4,000 institutions that exist, like I told you about, you need to research not only the programs they offer, but the type of financial aid they give. Because not all of them give financial aid, not all of them give financial aid to international students, and not all of them can give 100% financial aid to international students. So there's a lot of things you have to consider when you're looking at the US. There's two types of kind of scholarships that most students could get. One is need-based. This is if your family does not have the financial means to cover the cost of studying at the institution, you can get a need-based financial aid package. You can get a merit-based package. This is going to be based on what you have achieved thus far. So your good grades, maybe scores on exams. Again, if you're a student athlete or a musician, there's specialized scholarships that are available for you as well. For graduate students, I don't have them listed here, but for graduate students, it's kind of in the merit-based range. Most graduate students will get what's called a graduate teaching assistantship or a research assistantship. This is where you'll be teaching on that campus to undergrad students or doing research in a lab with a professor as part of your tuition package. There are many institutions in the US that are looking to expand the diversity on their campus and try and get as many students as possible from many parts of the world on their campus. And so we'll have some specialized scholarships available, especially for diversity. So sometimes they want, if you get a diversity scholarship, they want you to basically be a cultural ambassador on that campus. So talk about your culture, your language, things like that to other students on campus. So again, it's not easy. You still have to do a lot of research. You still have to have really good grades and experience and demonstrate your potential for success on the campus. But there are ways that you can find to cover the majority, if not all, the costs of your studies in the US. Okay, so what's next? You want to go to the States, you know it's expensive, you know you can find some way of covering costs, so what do you do now? So Education USA is the main sponsor of today's event. How many of you are aware of Education USA? You've heard of Education USA before today? Only a few of you. Okay, so I'll just give you the short version of it. So Education USA is a State Department program, and the advisors work for students to help you find your best fit and help support you the best way possible in your application process. Because we're supported by the State Department, services are for free, so you can get help from advisors in various ways. You can get individual consultations from them. They have lots of programming, such as the Alumni Fair today, but they have webinars, they have in-person meetings, and there are 4 centers in Kiev, or in Ukraine, so you can come to the center in Kiev. Every Thursday, there's presentations here at America House that education advisors do, and then also Dnipro, Lviv, and Kharkiv have advisors that sit there. Beyond just getting help from the advisors, they also have libraries in their centers where you can access various test prep materials. So if you're preparing for the TOEFL or the IELTS or SAT or GRE, they have materials available there, and you can come in and study in their centers. Okay. When you're going to work with your Education USA advisor, there are several ways that they will help prepare you, but kind of the short version of how you would go through this application process is it's called the 5 Steps to US Study. And the advisors can have programming on each one of these steps to help you learn more and more about each of them. So in step 1, they help you understand how to research your options. How do you look at 4,000 institutions and come up with a list that's manageable for you, right? Then they'll help you understand all the options for financial support that's available to from a U.S. institution, and help you understand how you can be competitive for that financial support. Later on, they'll also do programming helping you finish your application. So this could be writing these essays that I've already mentioned, preparing all the other documents you need to send to the U.S., communicating with professors or the people at the university if needed. And then if you're successful with the admissions process, they also have programming about applying for visas. We invite consular officers to participate. We have one here today. She'll be speaking at the opening and have a table during the exhibition time. And then there's pre-departure orientation to help you adapt better, the best way possible to a U.S. campus. So these are all things you can expect to see when you are working directly with your Education USA advisor. 2 main programs that Education USA has running. Competitive College Club is a cohort program for high school and university students. This program is helping students with the technical side of applying to U.S. universities, so writing essays and those sorts of things. But there's also a big cultural component to help you understand best what American campus is like and how you can best adapt to that campus once you get there. For students who are active in Competitive College Club and have high financial need, there is, like I mentioned, the State Department Program Opportunity Funds. This is the program, again, doesn't cover tuition and fees. It's not a scholarship in that sense, but it does cover the application costs. So taking the exams, if you don't live in Kiev, you need to travel to Kiev or another testing center. And then the students who are successfully admitted with full financial support, so you're required to get full financial support, are able to get a second phase of this funding, which includes the visa and CVIS fees that you have to pay to go to the States, your plane ticket to the US, and also a settling-in amount that you can use to however you wish. So these are the 2 main programs that Ukraine is running for really active and engaged students. Okay, so 1 second, I'll just play this video. Let's see this one. Okay, so before I play this video, who can tell me how many Ukrainian students are in the States studying right now?
1,000.
3,000, 1,000.
10,000.
10,000.
1 million.
Well, not 1 million.
500.
500, okay. So we'll come back to that question in a second. Let's play this quick video. Hopefully there's sound.
My name is Anna Hermes.
Меня зовут Саша.
My name is Daria.
My name is Camila.
My name is Radmila Tsimon.
I really have a passion and really have a dream to open a Christian college here in Ukraine.
At first, I emailed to 100 universities.
I applied to 7 universities, got accepted to 3, and all of the 3 universities gave me a scholarship.
Поступить и получить стипендію в реалі.
Ви 100% отримаєте свою фінансову допомогу, якщо ви підготуєте класні документи.
My mom couldn't believe that I'm going to be accepted anywhere.
Будь-який результат, він не є спонтанним.
I wanted to go to this particular college and only this college.
Якщо ти хочеш, ти сьогодні хочеш.
Nothing works more than talking to university officials.
They have already been there and they know what you should do.
И за вас никто эту работу не сделает.
If you really want something, you will get it.
Apply. And don't be afraid to dream big, because if you dare to dream it, you'll achieve it for sure.
Okay, so that was just a small portion of the Ukrainian students that are in the U.S. currently right now. And these students have worked directly with the Education Say advisors in Ukraine. So these students are the ones that have come to the pre-departure orientation to share their good news with you. So what I wanted to finish off with is just how it is realistic for Ukrainian students to think about studying in the United States. So we don't have 1 million Ukrainians in the States right now. Again, according to the Open Doors report that I referred to earlier, is that the number of students from Ukraine in the U.S. is about 1,800, a little bit over 1,800. About 45% of these students are pursuing undergraduate degrees. 35% in that range are pursuing graduate degrees. And then the rest are pursuing either short-term programs or something called OPT, which is optional practical training. And this is where students have the right to work in the United States for a year, sometimes up to 2 years, depending on your major, in your field of study after you graduate, still being on your student visa status. You get great work experience that way. And of these 1,800 students in the States, they are studying in 47 states and Puerto Rico. So again, they're going everywhere around the country. They're not just staying in a couple of states. And of those students in the States, they're studying currently at, I think, 530 some different types of institutions. So they're not at all 4,000 institutions, obviously, but they're studying at about over 500 institutions in the U.S. So again, for your peers, for other Ukrainians who are physically in the States right now, you could also be part of this number in the future. Okay. I mentioned Opportunity Funds program, so I just wanted to show you the results of the program so you can see that it does work for some students. Over the years, this program's been working about 10 years in Ukraine. Of these students, most of them are coming from outside of Kiev. Again, this is for students who are high achieving but have financial need. Of those who were successfully admitted to U.S. institutions, 153 of them, they reported over $7 million of first-year funding. And of those 153 that went to the States, 124 ended up going and studying in the States, and they reported over $4 million in first-year funding. So again, a lot of funds are available to Ukrainian students. You just have to try, right? So that's the end of the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. After at 3 o'clock is when the exhibition space will be open and you can go and speak to different alumni. So keep in mind, these are not representatives of these institutions, so they won't be able to answer every single specific detail of that university, but they can share their experience as a student on those campuses, right? So I hope that you ask them lots of questions, they give you lots of good feedback, but we have about 5 minutes before I'm technically allowed to let you go. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I wanted to ask specifically graduate student admissions for tuition fees. You must have mentioned, I must have missed a moment. If there is some information on this topic, could you please repeat? Tuition fee financial bonds.
So in terms of tuition fees, as I mentioned at the very beginning, every university sets their own fees. So there's not one set fee for all graduate programs. It's going to largely depend on the university. Most universities will have a set fee for all programs that you study in, and sometimes there's an extra fee for like laboratory access and things like that. That might be a part of it, but for the most part, it really is going to depend on the institution. This can be at a public institution that's kind of a smaller size. This can be about $50,000. For a very large institution, it could be more or less. So
Financial aid.
financial aid, yes. So for graduate students, the two forms of financial support that you will be looking for is called a teaching assistantship or a research assistantship. So these are two ways where you would be working for the university where you're studying as you take your classes. So you have your class hours that you have, and then you'll be teaching or doing research for a set portion of your time beyond that. Students who are very successful in getting teaching and research assistantships have some teaching or research experience now. So if you're wanting to get a teaching assistantship, try to find a way to get teaching experience. Be a tutor, volunteer somehow. You don't have to be paid in that position to have that experience. And same thing for research. Try to get some experience doing research.
Right here.
Yes. And something else that you can consider for graduate students is, say you want to get a graduate degree in physics, right? But the physics department doesn't have any more teaching or research assistantships available for that current year. If that university teaches something Slavic language, Ukrainian or Russian, some students have gone to be like a language tutor for Ukrainian or Russian to get their teaching assistantship funds while they're getting their physics graduate degree. So there's all kinds of ways you can think about getting either teaching or research assistantship, but having that experience, that practical experience now will really help your application help you get those awards in future.
Well, I'm not a Ukrainian, so my Ukrainian marks here, like the language lesson marks are like a little low, but like except those, my marks are like high, and I wonder if it would affect like scholarships or like my like DPA and like stuff like that, because I think my marks are going to be low in DPA and like Z and O because like I don't know Ukrainian. So would it affect my like universities and like college applications a lot?
It depends on the institution. So this is why they have essays. Every university has an essay, and this is your chance to explain why something in your application maybe not as high as it could be. So in those cases, if you're able to explain in your essays kind of the reason why your GPA is not as high as it could be, we found that it's okay for most institutions if you're able to explain it well in those essays. So this is why a lot of students kind of dread the essay. They think it's just this kind of burden they have to get through, this 300 words to write and be done with it. But it really is your chance to highlight anything that's not either missing from your application or any kind of areas you might consider a deficiency of your application to really explain and provide that background information for the universities.
Also, I write essays, okay with that, but I want to study architecture, like science, math, and stuff. The level of my English, is it that important for like comparing to other universities if I like want to study architecture?
You have to have a high level of English regardless. Sometimes for graduate programs, some STEM fields will have a lower English requirement for international students. If you're doing research, if you're teaching, you still have to have at least, I don't know, it depends on the institution, but 90 to 100 on a TOEFL or higher. For undergraduate students that want to be competitive for financial support, especially full financial support, really need to have very, very, very strong English skills. So really high marks on the TOEFL or IELTS exams.
Could I pass IELTS and like don't worry in future that some university could ask me for a TOEFL?
No, so well, I don't say all because there's probably some exception, but the vast majority of institutions, especially those admitting international students, will accept the TOEFL and the IELTS exam equally. So you should not have any issues with that.
Could you please explain how health insurance works and how much does it usually cost?
So health insurance, it's going to depend on the university how much it's actually going to cost, but it can be several hundred to several $1,000s a year that you have to pay, and American students have to pay this as well. Most of them are covered by their family insurance. They can get a waiver sometimes. The insurance is for you to use the medical facilities on campus. So if you get just a little cold and you need to go to the doctor, you break your arm, anything that happens, the insurance is going to cover you while you're on that campus. And also things like vaccinations are covered. Depends on the institution. So like for my graduate degree, so I went to the Ohio State University that has a medical school, and you have access to like reduced cost services that are given by like higher classmen medical students, right? But then also there is a medical clinic where you can get regular checkups, so just regular health checkups. If you're sick, like I said, if there's anything else wrong with you, you can get checkup there as well. That's all covered with this health insurance that you have to have. Anything else? Well, it's 3 o'clock, so I guess I can let you go to see the rest of the alumni. So I believe the opening ceremony is taking place upstairs now-ish, in the next few minutes. And then the alumni will be sitting at their tables, and then they can answer questions during the rest of today's event. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
The advisors are here till 6, and so they can help you with that. I don't give consultation to students directly since advisors are here, but they can either talk to you today or they can sign up for a so they work, let's see, they work until usually 6 during the week. I think Wednesdays they work until 8, maybe even later. And again, they're available by email and by phone too, so if you can't physically come to them, they can answer your questions that way too.
Hello. First of all, thank you for your presentation. So besides apply to Europe and sometimes they are cheap can I classify and apply with that to America? Would it be significant?
Yeah, so the GRE is actually an American exam that European
really?
universities
I didn't know about
yeah.
that.
So yes, you can use the scores however you like. So you can send them to actually send the European to that's all fine. And then the advising students have prep materials for the GRE, so you can go and use their books to prepare that way.
Yeah, I've heard it's not actually required in the list of required documents, but that would be significant for my application. All right, thank you. Is it possible to get maybe your business card or your email address?
I can bring these business cards with me. I don't work directly with students, but the advisors have a table out here and they can give you their contact details and they can help you with everything.
All right, thank you.
Якщо ЕЛС в тебе буде
I'm interested in interpreting programs, and there's very I was thinking about when they have very extremely high 40,000 for the year and total 100,000 for a program for 2 years. I know about scholarships and other programs, but I wanted to ask directly about the tuition fee, which is astronomical, as you said.
Right.
Are there any opportunities to help with that one?
Well, so if you get the tuition fee waiver, I didn't explain it all the way, I guess, but for the tuition, for the teaching and research assistantships, those include the tuition fee waiver. So that means that when you get either one of those assistantships from the university, you will get a stipend to kind of cover your living expenses, but then it also will cover all of your academic related expenses on the campus. So that's kind of, so you're not getting your salary per se, but they're covering all your costs for your tuition. And then you get a stipend, and then so you don't have to worry about paying that fee. Depending on the field of study, there might be an activity fee or a laboratory fee that you might have to pay. That's addition to that, but for the most part, they are always going to be coming with, most always will be coming with that tuition fee waiver.
Okay, then get that way. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I have a question. Sure. So I'm in 10th class now.
Okay.
And when should I apply for a scholarship?
So you apply for financial aid and scholarships at the same time you're applying to the university. So the universities that typically have the most financial support will have really early deadlines. So this is going to be, I think the earliest deadline is November 15th. And they have things called early action, early decision that you can apply for. And that way you get admitted usually faster, and then they tell you about your financial aid usually faster. It doesn't always work that way. But since you're in 10th grade right now, you would be sending your documents in the fall of your last year of school here. So now would be the time to prepare essays and do research to try to find universities you think could be a good fit for you. And then after you take the exams, look at what their admissions rates are and see how your scores match up with them.
Should I apply after passing IELTS exam or before?
We typically will be be submitting your documents after you've taken the exams. So after you have this course in hand, because when you submit the application, what you're going to do is have an application form that has all of your biographical information on it. There'll be an essay, your test results, recommendation letters, all of it gets sent kind of together. And so they look at the whole package together.
And I'm interested in international relationships.
Okay.
So could you recommend some universities from this list?
Okay, so most of the universities will have that degree. It's a very popular degree that's offered in the States. So it would be hard for me to tell exactly which one to go to. Let's see. Any of these larger institutions, this is a law school, so that will be, so this is going to be like a liberal arts college. George Washington University is also a very large institution. The University of Louisville definitely will have that program. Sure. And I don't know all the alumni personally that are here, but I imagine that quite a few of them might have majored in international relations. Again, I think you should go and talk to everyone just to see what they have, but these are the ones I know that definitely have that major. Like I said, it's a very popular major. There you go. So quite a few of them.
Після того здаєш лист, який подаєшся.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Hi, I wanted to ask some questions about the high schools, because I'm planning to apply for them so I can start my education at September 2018.
Okay.
So I did some research and I made a table about requirements and the tuition fees and application fees. So I wanted to ask how many schools is it okay to apply for? Because my opinion is like 10-15 high schools. It will be okay, so I can get some schools that can accept me for scholarships and choose one of them.
Well, we work mostly with higher education, so I don't know as much about the high school system. But when we talk to students, high school students that want to apply for bachelor's programs, we usually tell them to apply for 6 to 8 schools, maybe up to 10. But usually more than 10 is not going to work in your favor because each one has a separate application, you write essays, and that just adds to your work. So I would say probably the case might be the same for high schools that would be accepting international students that would be giving financial aid anyway. That may be up to 10 maximum. Probably the best thing.
Okay, yeah. Also, they require TOEFL as a language test, and also one of 4 standardized tests like SSAT, PSAT, SAT, or ICE. So, how do you think what test is the easiest and the most popular?
Well, I don't know which one is the easiest per se, and I don't know if all those are even offered in Ukraine, so that might limit your choices as well. I know the SAT is definitely offered in Ukraine. I don't know if PSAT is offered in Ukraine. That's kind of like the kind of pre-test for SAT. And the other two I'm not sure about. I don't know much about them.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, and also I wanted to ask you about one thing that if some of Ukrainian students have studied over past 2 or 3 years, is it like not a opportunity? It's like a plus or minus for me when I will be applying to the school?
I don't think it really matters. So there's some universities that are recruiting international students who are not physically in the U.S. right now, but then there are other institutions that are traveling to those international schools and recruiting international students. I think the only thing that would make a difference would be, well, it definitely would help you because you'll be having more intensive exposure to English language and studying English. That will be a nice plus for your application, but it's not required, obviously, for you to go to high school in the States for undergraduate degrees. I think that just either if you stayed here or went to the States for high school, just making sure that you took as rigorous courses as possible. So taking the hardest courses available and doing your best in them, that will work in your favor. And then also just trying really hard. So, doing all your homework and getting really good recommendation letters from your teachers. Those are the things that would work either in the US or if you stayed here.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Welcome.
Have a nice day.
You as well.